All right, guys, welcome back to another edition of the Coaches Roundtable. So we were just talking, it's been a couple months, so I'm sure we got plenty to catch up on, and hopefully we get through, more than 1 to 2 questions today. But like we said last time, I think everybody kind of likes the banter at the beginning. So we'll just start with that. Brandon, how's things been going the last couple months for you, man?
Man, yeah. Like we were remarking off air, it's actually been a few months since we all three of us got together and were able to do one of these. So glad to be back in it, starting 2023 off right. But honestly, everything has been going well on my end. Obviously, we've passed the holiday season, but I had a really joyous holiday season with my friends, family, and loved ones. So that was a blessing in and of itself. But we usually do a recap on like training, nutrition, and business. So on the training and nutrition front, I'm currently in a building phase. I believe at the last coaches roundtable we did, I was just finishing and getting the blood work for my recovery dieting phase. So that has long since passed. I'm in a building phase, and really I'm just aiming to slowly, add tissue. I'm 17 years into training at this point. Like, I'm not trying to dirty bulk and gain all this tissue, but or try to overshoot things. But really I'm just trying to, and it's all about the daily process at this point for me. So it's about accumulating productive training sessions day by day, week by week, as well as pairing my nutritional periodization with that training periodization. And then on the business front, we are in the second week of January. So obviously, I'm sure you guys can relate to me on this. It's been extremely busy. This is a little bit different for me, though, because this is the first year that I've been full-time within my coaching business, which is ironic because this actual week, this past Monday was my 10th anniversary, my 10-year that I've been coaching. So,
Congrats.
I appreciate it. So I have the date set. The second week of January in 2013 was the first time I had someone pay me for nutrition coaching in an online scenario. So it's been 10 years. And honestly, it's kind of crazy to think about. Like I'm very big into self-reflection. So anytime there's a date, whether it's New Year's or it's my birthday, I like looking at the previous year past. But in this case, being a 10-year anniversary, I looked over the last decade. And in one regard, it feels like I've been doing this forever because I've coached so many individuals over the year. But at the same time, it feels like it's like flown by because it's been one of my greatest passions in life. First and foremost, it's something that I think I got a much better experience. I don't know if I want to phrase it like that, but I was able to have a very unbiased experience to nutrition coaching because I got into it early when it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't, popular. I was doing it when people used to laugh at you. So I was doing it truly for the pure love of it. And I also did it in a perspective where it wasn't my main breadwinner. I was not dependent on nutrition coaching, especially in the early days. I'm charging people $50, $100 a month. Like, it was side money, but I had a full-time corporate career at the time and up until this past year. And so I was able to develop a love, a passion, and then also the skills, the experience, and the knowledge on the back end as a coach without that pressure. And what I really have seen over the years is there was a lot of people over the last 10 years. I was reflecting back earlier this week and I actually had a conversation with one of my good friends who's been in the coaching game for a long period of time. And like when I first got into this, the only people that were nutrition coaching that I knew of in like a public format that they were doing it online was Lane Norton. I'm in the Northeast, so if you guys are familiar with Dave Palumbo, he was doing it at the time, but he also had a nutrition or a sports nutrition company. So he owned a supplement company. There was Joe Klemczynski, which is like the diet doc, so old school guy. And there was a few others, if that. And so it was a really niche thing. There wasn't a lot of people. There was very few people doing this like a full-time profession. It wasn't until 2014 I flew down to Florida and did one of Lane's like power hypertrophy camps. And he kind of got me like really motivated. I was seeing how successful he was. He was doing in-person camps and stuff like that. And he was doing this full-time. Like this was his main emphasis. There wasn't like the social media like there is now and all the other things that Lane has done at this point, but he was full-time coaching. And it really like gave me the idea in my mind, like this could be a future. So let's stay in it. But over this time period, I've seen so many people that they jumped in a little bit too early. They made it their main thing and they did it just for like the financial, security of it and realized that either they didn't have the skills, they didn't have the passion, or they really just didn't have the desire for it. They burnt out and they're out of the game. So I look back with guys that started along the way, and I'm sure you guys can say the same thing. So it's been, immensely, it's been an experience and journey filled with ups and downs, but I'm so glad that I got into it when I did. I'm so glad that I've been able to accumulate this experience. And then overall, just to start the year in a positive and productive way was, the best way that I could do so. So I'm glad to be starting off in this manner and glad to be back on with you two.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I I definitely I agree with you that like this is definitely a field where I feel like it's when you're on the outside, it's like hey, I want to do that. That sounds cool. Like it would be easy, but man, I'll tell you what, it's definitely something you have to be, I feel like, passionate about. Like those are the people that last longest. And you could probably say that about any industry, but I feel like it's definitely the case here because as you guys know, there's a lot of ups and downs with it too, right? It's not always just great. There's always some ups and downs with it. And like, I feel like that passion definitely, can drive you to keep going. So I definitely feel you there. And it is interesting to see like a lot of people that were like in it when I first started. And this is more on the in-person side. And now like a lot of those people have like come and go. And it's like, you used to look up to those people and it's just interesting to see that. But I feel like there definitely is a high turnover rate in this field and definitely have to be in it for sure. You have to be passionate about it.
So we know statistically that personal training has one of the highest turnover rates within fitness in general. So if we look at sports nutrition, so supplementation, like within GNC and corporate sectors, as well as supplementation, sales, as well as personal training or in-person training, and then online, in-person training has a very high turnover rate. However, so does online training. And up until recently, it wasn't like it is now. So like, dude, in 2013, when I first started telling people I was doing nutrition coaching online, most people laughed at me. They either didn't understand the concept, they thought it wasn't a real job. And luckily, like I had the backing that I was like, yeah, well, I have a full-time corporate job as well, but I also do this thing online. And it spurred from the fact that I was in person training people. So I started in a gym and I had been doing it for years. And then I took on a corporate position where I was traveling the country and my clients wanted to still stay engaged with me. They still wanted to get programming. They just, I had to explain to them, listen, I can't come to the gym, before or after. I'm going to be traveling or I'm going to be in an office. And so that was what allowed me to transfer over. But there was a lot of people that they tried going all in, say 2013, 2014, 2015, when this industry was still budding, it was still growing. And it wasn't taken as seriously, or it wasn't looked at as much of a professional entity as it is now. And now a lot of people will say it's saturated, but you know what? With that saturation has come good and bad things. One of the good things that it's come is it's cemented online coaching as a true career where people can make, a secure financial, they can support themselves, they can support their families. And it's also something that people acknowledge as a career, as something that they're looking for. People are, clients are much more willing to look into online coaching. Whereas when I first started getting online clients, especially, it was all referral based. It was mostly out of the gyms that I went to. But initially, when I was getting referrals to people that were outside of my personal network, so it was a friend of a friend of a friend, they wanted a full explanation. Like, how do you do this? I don't understand. Like, you're doing this online, like there's no in person, like I can't come see you. And, a lot of my initial clients, honestly, I used to do like this hybrid model where I would have them meet me at gyms and I would look at them over in person. And then I would take notes. Like at the time, I didn't even have an iPhone. So I would take notes in a notebook and then I would give them updates online and then send it over via email. However, now it's like people know that this is an industry. They're so used to doing things mobily or through online features. And so it's not, think about where Amazon was 10 years ago. A lot of us were going to stores, buying clothes, buying different things. We weren't getting things, Prime expressed to us 2 days, 1 to 2 days out. And so now the way that we go about purchasing things, investing into things, and even pursuing knowledge is completely different. I'm taking online courses right now in multiple colleges. And 10 years ago, I would have been in a university lecture hall. So it's completely different. So it comes with its, benefits and its downsides, but it's been, I'm glad to have been able to be a part and see this evolution and stay in it. Cause like I said, like a lot of the guys that I saw early on who were successful, like these were either contest prep coaches or they were lifestyle coaches. They just got burnt out because they made this their only thing. And then also there was other people within that intermediary time. And I'm sure you guys remember this, like say like 2015 to 2018, a lot of people thought that they would take like pictures on their Instagram, like them sitting back at a beach, like with their laptop. Like they thought that was what online coaching was. And that isn't what it is whatsoever. Like I spend more time looking at a computer, analyzing labs and like just going over things and metrics. It's really, it's more of like data analysis than it is anything else. I think that's why I've been successful in it, because I come from a statistical background within supplementation. Like I was always running stat reports. So it's pretty much a very similar thing, but it's not this sexy thing. Like if you think you're going to sit back and, kick back and drink Mai Tais on the beach every day, every week and be a successful online coach, you have another thing coming to you.
Wait, you guys aren't doing that? No, I'm just messing with you. No, man, congrats on 10 years though. That's awesome. That's a big milestone for sure, especially in this field like we talked about. Jared, what's up, dude?
Not a lot. That's an interesting conversation though. Jeff, when did you like coach your first client?
Man. I guess we going in person or we going online with this?
In person, like
In
first
person?
session.
In person, I think it was 20 2016, I think it was. It could have been early 2017, but so a little over 5 years now. And like Brandon, you said, man, it's like I feel like I've done this forever, but it's also at the same time gone by super quick. I'm like, I kind of look back, I'm like, damn, and I had to do a little bio on myself. I was like, man, I've already been doing this for over 5 years now, which is pretty crazy to think that it's gone that fast. So, and then online, it was like luckily I had a mentor like at the very beginning of when I was coaching in person, who kind of like planted the seed about like doing online training. And so like I kind of was already in it like right away, but I was getting most of my experience, with in person. As you guys know, that's where you probably want to get some experiences in person before you just go straight online, because, you really do get to, there's a lot that I think goes into working with people. And it's, as you guys know, it's like we have systems that we have now that really help us to be able to connect with people online. But I think that you do need that kind of like prereq of being online or in person for at least a little bit to get that, experience. I think if you're missing that, you can do it, but I think it's a lot more challenging. So, but Jared, when was your first coaching client?
Mine was May 2014. So it is interesting to your point. Also, I think that mine was May 2014. My first online client was I think it was April 18th of 2018. Because I remember I was like talking about it. I was trying to get it going for so long. And then finally, like the girl finally hit me up in Facebook Messenger. It's like, absolutely. Now I got to figure out how the hell to do this. But I think to your point about working with people in person, I think that a lot of that is you understand the communication side of things so much better. Like Brandon, I think this is something you do incredibly well, where like, even like, I know our conversations in like the last 24 hours have been like very vulnerable, hard things for me to talk about, but it's been like, it's like meant a lot to me to how much like how well we can like have those conversations and how like receptive to that you are. Mm-hmm. Where I think that like working with people in person, I think that most of the people you attract to work with in person, like just like the emotional intelligence, the communication are just as much like helping that person get results as it is like, it's so much less like nerding out over the data than it is like in the online setting where you're typically working with sometimes it depends, but sometimes like a more advanced clientele. So I think that's a very valuable side of it. But yeah, dude, I agree. It is crazy to think about. Like, I know for me, Corey Gregory was my guy in like 2011, 2012. I was like, I don't know what this guy is doing, but like, I like to work out. He somehow has like this career where he does like some type of online thing. So I didn't know like when I started college in 2011, it was like, I don't even know how this works, but I know he was like a personal trainer and now he's doing this thing. So I'm going to go to school to say I'm going to be a personal trainer, which doesn't even make sense, right? You don't need to be a personal trainer. But I remember even like in 2014, like when I first started coaching people, it was like, I didn't have any examples of people that were actually coaching online. I don't think it was like until 2016, 2017 to where I really saw like, oh, okay, here's kind of how you do this. But even like since 2018, it's crazy to think about how much it's evolved with like, as you said, Brandon, people's understanding of it, but also just like the systems and how much easier it is to deliver things. It just, as a whole, it's just so much different. It's been kind of crazy to see.
No, I actually, I would love to expand a little bit more on that, because nowadays we have a lot of coaches that get into the scene the last few years. And especially since the pandemic, a lot of people transitioned online before or without ever working in person. I do think that this is a conversation. I mentor a lot of other, new and upcoming coaches. And I often tell them, listen, if you have never gotten experience in person, I'm not saying that you cannot be an online coach. What I'm saying is you're most likely at a disadvantage. And here's the thing. I got my first in-person training client in the summer of 2010. So we're talking 13, years ago almost. And so it's been a long time. However, the first 3 years, I did not take people online because I was working in person. That, online really wasn't even an idea in my head. I knew very few people that were doing that. And most of those that I saw that were successful within the fitness industry, even from a coaching perspective, like people that were bringing individuals to stage, were doing it in person. They had an office in a gym. They were a personal training manager or the head of a personal training staff. And then they would have their clients come in that maybe was a contest prep client or a transformation client, and they would do in-person check-ins. And I actually mentored under someone that did that, and he owned his own business out here. He was an IFBB pro in New Jersey and had a very successful contest prep business. And he did it all within a powerhouse gym, office that he rented out. So he trained people there, but then he also had clients that lived all around the state, all around the Northeast. They would come and travel. We had, IFBB Pro from New York. They would travel 2.5 hours every single week just to do an in-person consultation with him. And I was like his understudy, and I actually ran a supplement company for him while, sales wise, while I was in college. And so I got to see that in person. And, often, Jeremiah, we've had this conversation. I'm very analytical in how I look at pictures. And I think one of the biggest things that's come from is one of two things. The fact that I looked at people in person, especially when I first started coaching, and also that I was a contest prep coach for, much of my early career. That's all I worked with. So I was picking at people's skin. Like if you ever look up videos of me with some of my FBB pros that I've prepped for stage, I'm like pulling at Anthony Scalza's skin. Like there's certain things I'm able to see in person and as well as visually through pictures. That's my first piece of data that I'm looking at, because there was a lot of things, all the systems that I have now, I didn't have this 10 years ago. So I was really going off of the skills that I built in person, as well as the communication skills. There were so many times that I would have a program written up on paper, and a client would come in and their biofeedback just from their body language would indicate that something was off, and that we needed to take 5 or 10 minutes to have a conversation about maybe what's going on with your home life. And Jeremiah can attest to this. I'm very big into an all-encompassing picture of what's going on. This is, I know it's kind of like a hippie word to use, a holistic viewpoint of doing this, but coaching is all encompassing. And I always say that coaching has to go far beyond the X's and O's of nutrition in terms of calories and macros. And then for training within sets and reps, because you have to realize that stress, sleep, relationships, your mental health, all these things have a massive impact on your ability to transform your body, because we honestly cannot separate our psychology from our physiology. And I learned that from seeing people in person, from giving someone a program and realizing that although I was pushing them into the gym, I was pushing them to failure. Like sometimes all the things that was going on outside of that 1 hour session that I had with them 3 to 4 days a week were what were the bottlenecks to them getting the progress that I expected them to get. And that's where it really caused me to dig in deeper and peel back the layers of the onion, and really inspired me to go to blood work and blood chemistry courses to go look into that, and to, really further my education in all aspects of nutrition coaching, from not only the physiological side, but also the psychological side. So, being that I had an experience, and all three of us have an experience with coaching in person, I think that gives us a leg up on coaches that didn't go through that experience, because there are going to be skills and an ability to express yourself, to communicate, to have hard conversations. Coaching isn't all about just telling a client what they want to hear. It's also about telling them what they need to hear. And that's an ability that you need to get there. I'm the kind of person that if you see me, if you meet me, I'm the exact same way that I am on camera or I am on a podcast. And I'll be completely blunt and honest with you with the utmost respect. However, I'm a very honest and transparent individual. And that came from coaching in person, because I couldn't hide my responses through a computer. It wasn't like, someone wasn't giving me their all, or I knew they were, slacking off, or there was a hard conversation we need to have about their realistic goal setting, or the fact that they weren't setting reasonable goals. Those were things that I had to tackle in person, have that hard conversation, break it to them, and then really be able to take a step back, get their response, take it in, and then move forward with that relationship.
I felt like with in-person too, it got to the point where, once I started to learn more, and then I did work with a good amount of clients online and like got, fairly good systems down with that. I just felt like it got to the point to where I think there is a lot of value in doing in-person training, but then it just got to the point to where, like you said, Brandon, it was like the bottlenecks were always like things outside of the gym. It was like, I spent so much time doing that and just kind of watching them do reps, when it was like, there was just so much more to it. And I felt like that was just a little tiny, small piece of the pie. And it was just like, man, I just feel like not being efficient with my time here. And it just got to the point at the end of when I was doing in-person training, I was just like, man, I got to switch to online, because I just feel like you can kind of just touch on so many different things. And like, you can dive deep into lifestyle, nutrition, all those things that again are important. Now, like I said, I think the training aspect is super important. Like, making sure somebody is training properly, technique is solid, but like we still have tools that we can get away with, online with that. Now, I do think like, obviously if it's a brand new person into the gym, maybe they're not great for online and they do need more of a in-person trainer, and that, for a little bit of time to get their technique dialed in. But that's just my experience with it, and like how I felt, with that transition from where I was just like, I gotta go fully online, because I feel like I can give way more online than I can just in person. Also, Jeremiah on Corey Gregory, dude, I definitely was into his stuff for a while too. He's still around too, which is crazy, man. Like, he still puts out programs and stuff like that. He's still putting stuff out. But the mindset manual was one. And then remember his podcast, I think it was Business and Biceps or something like
Yes,
that.
sir. Yeah. That was the first podcast I ever listened to. That's
Yep.
crazy.
I don't think that's around anymore though, is it? I don't think he does that.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
In retrospect, like thinking about all of that though, one thing I wish I would have done differently that you kind of hit on, Brandon, is I wish I would have found a mentor, like a true mentor earlier. Because very much for me was like I'm like reading T Nation and the bodybuilding.com forums like all the time, and I'm eventually got into podcasts and things like that. But I it's wasted time, but still it's like frustrating to think like how much further we could be if it would have been like, okay, right away, I'm like learning from someone like this. Like I didn't really start investing in myself until like 2017. I was when I actually hired my first coach. And then it was like, what have I been doing? I remember like right away, it was like, holy shit, I just learned so much better how to help my clients. Like it's just like completely blew my world open, because before it was just like, hey, I'm in Lincoln. I stumbled across Eric Helms' YouTube. So like I understand nutrition at a very basic level because I've read the Muscle and Strength Pyramids. And that to me was like, I know everything. And then it like completely, like my world just got so much bigger. I wish that I would have done that in 2014 though, instead of waiting like that good three some years to get to that point.
The great thing about life and this industry in general is that it's never too late to invest into yourself. So I'm 10 years into this. I still invest into mentorship calls. I still look to consultations. I still ask guys like Alan Aragon and Scott Stevenson, who have been mentoring me for years, questions. And even just, at this point, it's more of, I want to dive in deeper, and I don't want them to tell me an answer. I want them to say, I give them, some prompts sometimes, and I'm like, listen, can you point me in the direction of the research? I'll spend the next 8 hours if I need to dig in. I'll do it myself, but then, I'll consult with them some questions and stuff. And it's just taking that curiosity and being willing to dig in deeper. And that's honestly, another reason as to why I've never niched myself down with a specific type of clientele. Because every time I get a client, and it's not that I can work with everyone, I'm always willing and more than happy to refer out if it's outside of my scope. However, there's been a lot of times that I've gotten an individual who, I'll be very frank with them. Listen, this is, especially early on in my career, this isn't my specialty. I've never worked with someone with blank, autoimmune disorder, whatever it may be, but I'm willing to take the time and invest the energy and effort to research it. And that's where I've been able to help so many clients as a result, because what we have to realize is that learning about a condition, learning about a topic does not just impact that person that you're specifically utilizing that information for. That will impact all the clients that you get in the future for that. So there were times, I remember early on in my career, I didn't make $1 for myself. Every time that I made money, because I had a full-time corporate career, that was what I paid my bills and supported my family with. Everything went into my education, went into courses, went into seminars. So it would be flying around the country when I had an open weekend to go to a Ben Pakulski seminar or a Jordan Shallow seminar, or, I went to see John Meadows multiple times, Stan Efferding, anyone you could think of within this industry. I remember Eugene Teo came over here one time, and I made sure I paid an arm and a leg to see him. I've seen, I've went and trained with Joe Bennett, anyone you could think of that was notable within this industry. I've made the most effort possible to make it happen. And oftentimes I lost money in the process. And that's what most people would think about. They would think about dollars and cents on that day or on that year when they're looking at their like wins loss column, or are they in the red or in the black? I never saw those type of things. When I would get on a consultation, sometimes I would have an issue with a client that I just didn't have the experience with, and I would consult someone else that was an expert in that field. And I would often pay for that single consultation more than that individual client was paying me for that month of coaching. However, I never saw it as a loss because I've utilized that information. I'm very big into note-taking, and I save all these things. So I have files upon files with this data. However, I utilized it with that client. I was able to get feedback from them, gauge their progression, see how these methods, these principles work, as well as the knowledge that I had acquired through that individual consultation. But then I've been able to utilize that with clients since then. I've been able to teach other mentees, other coaches on those topics. So it's always about this reciprocation. It's about these things come full circle, and don't think about just how learning this thing or investing into this entity is going to impact you in the moment, but how it's going to impact your career long term.
I definitely think that, since we're kind of on this topic, I feel like one of the biggest mistakes people make that end up like not staying in the industry a long time is they don't invest in themselves, right? Like they're thinking about how they just, I just don't have the money for that right now. And it's like, all right, well, I mean, how can you expect to get better? And how can you expect people to invest in you if you're not going to invest in yourself? And I just feel like that's one of the biggest mistakes people make is they don't like, yeah, maybe again, this is why I think it goes back to like, this isn't an easy field because you know, in the beginning, like you're getting paid for probably the clients that you work with. And so you don't have a lot of funds maybe or something like that. But it's like, if you want to do it, you got to find a way to make it work. And I just think that most people that don't last are the ones that are just very, they just don't want to invest in their education or anything like that. Like there's just been a lot of coaches that I've like not me personally worked with, but you know, they've been like a colleague of mine, and the ones that aren't here are the ones that just were like, no, I don't have enough money to go and do that. I can't believe you're spending money on that. And it's just like, all right, well, you know, hey, it is what it is. I guess we'll see who's doing it, you know, long term. So, and I know Brandon, we've talked too, like you said, you know, you spent well over $100,000 in, you know, continuing education, and
very much
you know,
so.
Again,
and you know what? I say that openly because, and I don't say that as a braggadocious thing. It's over 10 years I've spent, you know, well into close to 200,000 at this point, to be honest with you guys. And I say this openly because I want to encourage other people. I've been willing to invest in myself because I know that it's going to pay dividends long term. There's going to have a domino effect, and I've been able to impact not only the clientele that I work with, but every single other person. So like someone like Jeremiah, I've been able to teach him things. He's passed that on to the coaches that he works with and so many other clients. So there's this ripple effect of coaching. I've been able to get on hundreds of podcasts and educate people that don't have the funds to be able to pay me for a consultation or pay to work with me. And also at one time, you know, prior to taking my business full time this past year, I didn't have the time to take them on. So I was able to give a service and give back information that I remember clawing at and looking for when I was starting up. And that I wish that someone would have taken the time, or that we had podcasts. Because when I first started training people, there was no such thing as podcasting, to be honest with you. I know it makes me sound old, but it's 2010. There's no podcasting. And so, you know, we have to think about these things, and there's this ripple effect. And I'm very prideful in the fact that I've invested in myself. And that's not to say that every investment that I made was worthwhile. There was a lot of courses that I took that I wish I didn't take. However, for every gimme, there's a gotcha. And I had to learn. And here was the thing. The courses that I only took one thing from, that was still one new piece of knowledge, but there was also courses that I took that I genuinely, now that I look back in retrospect, and also remember, hindsight's always 2020. I regret taking those. However, they increased my critical thinking skills because I realized how others were educating and their wrongs. And it made me look, they're making these claims about hormones or about thyroid or about this. And then I started looking up like their citations or the fact that they had no citations. And it made me dig deeper and realize, wow, they're pulling the wool over other people's eyes. And yes, I could have been misinformed and miseducated through their process. However, I had the curiosity and the gall to go after the true search of knowledge and the curiosity to do so. And now it's opened my eyes to, now I shouldn't follow that individual. Now I shouldn't take in their content. And it kind of gave me a very critical thinking mindset. So oftentimes, like when I hear someone speak, and this is something I got from Lane Norton, and I think this is one of the best things you guys could ever do, whether it be you two or the audience. Don't always think like, if you hear someone that speaks, don't always think like, oh, that's a fact. You know what I mean? Like I always think like with a critical mindset and say, how factual is that? It isn't like, oh, because they brought a PubMed ID. All well and good. You could have misinterpreted that. But I want to know, like, there's often times that I'll hear someone depicting a study, and I've read the study, and I know that they're misinterpreting it, or they're misextrapolating it, how they're, you know, to fit their bias. So it's having that critical mindset and always being willing to say, all right, let me really objectively look at things and not just take things for someone's word of mouth, but also it's given me the ability to differentiate between who is a true expert and who isn't, and whose knowledge I could trust. And then I look at their circle. So we can give a great example. Eric Helms is someone that I have the utmost respect for from an intellectual pursuit, you know, perspective, because he always gives an unbiased opinion, and his breadth and depth of knowledge is very, it's hard to compare with other people. And so when you look at his circle, look who he surrounds himself with, people of very like-minded integrity that are giving out good information without these bias and preconceived notions and these dogmas. And so it really gives you an ability to be a critical thinker and say, all right, well, you know, if he aligns with, you know, it's not always, you know, sometimes it's a personal alignment, sometimes it's a professional alignment, but often you can look and say, all right, well, in this group, these individuals present information like this. But then we have other people that make zealous claims, that make like very definitive things. This is the end all be all. You have to do this. You can't do that. You can't eat this. When they make very definitive claims and there's never an it depends, that really is when I make, or when it causes me to be critical and really try to critically evaluate what they're saying.
So basically, like what you're saying is just go eat like liver meat and whatnot and just follow that, right? No, I'm just kidding. No, man, those are all great points. I love it. Jared, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to that?
I don't think so. I think again, the investing is a very like the willingness to invest yourself, like metaphorically and literally. I think a lot of times, like if you want to make it far in the space, you have to be willing to pay the price. That sounds like I'm not trying to like make that sound rah, but like a lot of it is literally like the amount of money, like going through the amount that we had spent last year, like we spent well over 40K just in the last year on continuing education, right? Like me personally. And that's again, I'm not trying to like flex or anything like that, but it's just like understanding like Brandon's like hundreds throwing like hundreds of thousands of dollars out there where like a lot of it is like you have to pay a price to acquire the knowledge. Like if you want to get to this place sooner, you have to be okay with that, right? And that's okay. Like some people aren't, but I think it's like an important lens for newer coaches to also look through with like there is again like a metaphorical and literal price that probably like if you want to advance quicker, you want to grow in your career quicker, you have to be willing to pay that where it's like you don't just get there without at least for the most part. I don't want to again like think anyone I don't like throwing numbers out, but like I again think that's helpful to hear where it's like I think we're all in the same boat where I think it would be very surprising to hear the amount that we've actually invested in like mentors and continuing education. And it's not just like, yep, I just kept up on Instagram posts and that's like kind of how we're in this position now, you know?
Yeah. And I don't think people need to like necessarily invest, that much either. It's just something though. Like don't, just if you're not ever willing to invest anything, it's like, all right, come on, you got to do something. One thing for me too, that I've tried to focus on recently more is more like my skills rather than like, just as a coach, we own our own business, we definitely, I'm sure you guys do this kind of judge your based on, what your revenue is, things like that sometimes, right? How many clients you have when at the end of the day, it's like that, to me, that's the same thing as like focusing on like just scale weight is like your only thing when you need to focus on like, developing your skills and things like that. And that's been like super helpful for me to really focus on that rather than again, like, just a short term of like, oh, this is how many clients I have. This is kind of the revenue for the year and things like that. So that's been super helpful. So yeah, I guess as far as the training goes, Jerry, we I don't know if we want to maybe hit on that. Is there? I know you are entering into a building phase here.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to maybe hit on that real quick or.
Yeah, I don't think we talked about this. I think last time we talked about this, Brandon was saying my pecs were small. So
Yep.
we decided to enter a chest and bicep specialization phase, which I just wrapped up the first week of. I like the split. It's a lot different. Whereas I feel lower body, of course, is very fatiguing to train. I feel, at least personally, back is relatively fatiguing to train. I feel like training chest or biceps relative to either of those is quite a bit easier. Now I'm only week one, right? So I've only been at 3 RIR so far. I just wrapped up week one. As of now, it's like relatively, like I would say from like a mental effort perspective, it's felt quite a bit easier even than what I was doing before, going from like training lower body twice a week to once a week. But we're training chest and arms 3 days a week. So basically that's every other training day. We have a lower body day. And then we have a basically back and delts day. I've really enjoyed the split though. Me and Brandon went back and forth on the exercise selection and things like that a little bit. So I've really enjoyed it. Just got blood work back, and I know the stress management. I think as a whole, we're pretty happy with how that looked. I don't know if you want to speak to that anymore, but this one thing that stood out was reverse T3 was pretty high. And it looked like it was in a pretty similar place to where it was this time last year. So the stress and like perception of, or not necessarily perception of stress, but like stress management techniques, as a whole, I think are things that I need to continue to work on. And again, like we've been going back and forth about things similar to this. And I think that like for me, one area to continue to grow in this year is like the mental side of things, being okay with like, trying to better manage my stress, making more time. Not that I necessarily feel extremely stressed, but like trying to make more time for like things outside of just career and our work here. So that's been like a kind of a, I don't know. It's been a lot of different things. I feel like we've been working through Brandon in the last couple of weeks where like that was interesting to again like see your insights from that. But yeah, as a whole, I'm stoked to get into this and I'm excited to see how it goes to kind of specialize in the chest and biceps.
Yeah, the balance aspect is tough, man, for sure. Definitely. It's really easy to fall just way on one side, like you said, the business and working out, and it's really hard to manage it also. I think that's always going to be a challenge, especially when you run your own business and it's something that you're super passionate about too. So as far as like you're in a build phase, I'm curious to hear how you guys are going to approach it? What's kind of are you guys going for a rate of gain? Are you not worried about that? Like, what's kind of the game plan there with that?
Jeremiah, you want me to take over?
Take it
All
away.
right. So obviously I'm the one doing the coaching over here, so I'll share as much as Jeremiah is open to me doing. So essentially, everything within my coaching is really based on data collection, analysis, and then moving forward based on the data that I've already collected with a particular client, as well as what I'm seeing in the biofeedback, whether it be objective or subjective feedback. And so within this specialization phase, we went back and forth on both his priorities, but it wasn't just from a muscle group priority. So I really want to differentiate that. When I say coaching is all encompassing, this needs to consider not only the goals of the client or the physique goals of the client, but also their other professional and personal goals. And really, when we looked at his hierarchy of importance, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or we look at his, hierarchy of importance in terms of goal setting, he really did put his relationship as well as his business development over physique. And it wasn't, I want to make this very clear, and Jeremiah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't that he was putting his physique on the back burner, but those two other entities, his relationship, as well as, considering the fact he was just engaged this past year, he has a great relationship with his fiance, as well as his business, were his top two priorities. So if he had to say, if I gave him a rank order, hey, give me your top three, it's going to go those two first and then physique development third. And so within that, he had wanted initially, and this was something that if you guys, any listeners of the audience, and Jeff is familiar with this, if you go back to our last coaches roundtable that was recorded at the end of November, we spoke about what I thought his priorities should be in terms of specialization cycle, and then what he thought his priorities were. And he wanted to do a leg specialization cycle, and I was more in favor of a chest, and then I would add in an auxiliary muscle group that was smaller, because we can really, considering the fact that chest isn't this majorly taxing muscle group, we could add in a secondary muscle group to specialize in. And so when it really came down to the conversation, what direction were we going to head into? We knew we were going to go into a lean building phase where the rate of gain was going to be truncated, meaning he's an advanced trainee. So really pushing for scale weight wouldn't be something that would be productive from a muscle growth perspective, because he's 10 plus years into training. B, it's also going to be counterproductive from a productivity standpoint. Because think about it, anyone that has really pushed hard in a building phase, and Jeremiah has been there where he's been, 40 pounds above where he is now, you're pushing excessive amounts of food, you're bloated, you're suffering from a lack of insulin sensitivity. So that's something I'm always keeping an eye on. And also, that is taking away from your productivity outside of the gym. So you might be well fueled within the 1 hour that you're in the gym. However, then you're dragging around trying to, spend so much time meal prepping, as well as getting meals down, feeling, a little bit more lethargic after meals. You're feeling that post prandial somnolence, which is like that sleepiness after meals, high carb meals, especially. So we decided to go for a rate of gain that really is approximating like 0.25% per week to maybe 0.5% per week. So we're really looking at maybe 1 to 2% per month, which is really where we see advanced trainees gain the most amount of lean tissue with the least amount of residual fat gain. So looking for, what most people would quote unquote say lean gains, which really anyone who's advanced really shouldn't be pushing for more than that, considering the fact that your rate of muscle gain is much slower than it was initially. And then also any fat that you accumulate by pushing that surplus and pushing that rate of gain higher is only going to be more fat that you will need to diet off later on in the process. So you're making your next dieting phase both more either a necessity for a more aggressive deficit or for a longer, more elongated fat loss phase in and of itself. So it's kind of killing the productivity of things. And so really what we decided was we'd go into a lean building phase. And then when it came to the specialization cycle, really when we think about it from a neurological perspective or a central nervous system perspective, training legs in a specialization cycle, and I've done it with clients where they're training legs 2 to 3 times per week and really allocating a lot of their volume budget for the week towards legs, it's both physically, systemically, and mentally fatiguing. So right now, with his emphasis being on, hey, listen, I spent a large period of time. We did a 15-week fat loss phase where he was dialed. He was locked in, following his plan every single day. There wasn't a lot of time for auxiliary activities, whether it be relationships or, things for his relationship, dates, things like that. He really wasn't that kind of, I don't want to say he went on the back burner, but there was less of an emphasis paid to that. So really our goals here was to spend more time in the business, spend more time in his relationship. So I wanted to make sure that the training fit that. So I wanted to go into a phase, and especially a specialization cycle based off the data that I had on him, where we were able to grow a body part that he does need to bring up. However, it wasn't going to negatively have a domino effect on every other aspect of his life, as it would potentially if we did legs. Also, with the data that I collected in previous training phases, I saw that his legs held and were able to make progress at a reasonably lower dose, like effective dose of training per week, then did his chest and then did his arms. So with that, I knew that if we were to bring his legs down to say minimum effective volume, as well as his back and delts, we were going to be able to maintain gains or really, still make progress, but not as expedited. But we were able to allocate more of that weekly training volume towards chest and biceps, which are still muscle groups he needs to bring up, but aren't going to be taxing him to the point where it's going to have negative residual effects on every other aspect of life. So I want him really being able to focus, mentally, physically in his training, but also being able to recover adequately and still be able to rise to the occasions for all other aspects. And this is something that my approach has changed so much within the last 5 years, because I went from really focusing my first 5 years of online training or online coaching with physique competitors, with guys that were just getting ready for the stage. That's all they did. Like, their career was secondary. Everything else, they didn't have relationships, and everything was secondary to their physique development. Whereas now I work with a lot more high level professionals and people that are successful coaches in their own right, like Jeremiah himself, who is not only has a full roster of clients under him, but has multiple coaches under him who he's a leader for, who is, a pillar in his community. So we have to take all these things into consideration. That's where I talk about coaching is more than X and O's. So when you're designing a training program, you can't just think about, just like we wouldn't think about just getting the most amount of volume in one session and not thinking about the subsequent sessions after that. We can't think about it from a mesocycle construction perspective, that we're just going to bury someone in the gym and then not expect that other aspects of their life are going to have negative effects. So we really have to take an all-encompassing approach where we consider the priorities, the needs, the preferences of that individual client and really program around that. So that really was my emphasis. And then when it came to the design of the specialization cycle, I said, listen, I want you mentally locked in. I want you bought into this. So this is a collaborative effort. I'm not here to coach you and I'm not a dictator. So we together, let's work on for your muscle group specialization cycle, let's work on exercise selection between the both of us. So there are going to be certain things, aspects of like a skeleton that I'm going to want to see, but I want you to have, the ability, the autonomy to choose things. You're an experienced trainee. I've seen how you responded to my baseline programs, but I also know that you have certain preferences, whether it's psychologically or physiologically. So either what he mentally connects best with or likes and enjoys going in training from an exercise selection perspective, or what he feels he connects best to. And so all those things were kind of like, this is like a soup. And so everything gets mixed up into that equation or that recipe. And that's how a program is cemented. So really what we're looking for is to see an accelerated rate of gain in his chest and biceps over the course of the next, 6, 12, 18 weeks, as compared to what we saw previously, also keeping in mind that he was in a deficit for the majority of the time that we were working together. So obviously he should see an accelerated rate of gain in those body parts to begin with. But really what I'm looking to do is seeing an accelerated rate of gain as compared to what we would see if everything was at an equal threshold of attention to detail paid to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like and it's funny we mentioned that. I've mentioned as well, like, hey, do you feel like the training is less neurologically taxing, basically, before we even had this conversation? Because it's very much like, yeah, that's how it's designed. Sessions are shorter. From a like stress perspective, again, to bring it back to blood work, for you, I'm curious, like, again, I think what reverse T3 is going to be depending on, again, there's a variety of different factors that could impact that. But in my case, we identified like, hey, this is probably most related to stress. And like, I feel the least stress I felt in like the last 5 years, like this last year. But I know that's, again, something we've been talking about quite a bit. For you, is that something that's like concerning to the point where it's like, hey, maybe we want to focus on this before we push the building phase? Or I imagine also it would be more so if it was like we're in lower body specialization, right? And you're trying to blast quads 3 days a week. And we also have this. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm going to speak specifically to you, but then I'm also, I can expand on this in generality. So, I'll speak in general first to just give the audience some background on reverse T3, seeing as it's essentially an inactive thyroid hormone that indicates stress in the body. So really what we see is there's multiple thyroid hormones, but really the most physiologically beneficial thyroid hormones are T4, which is inactive, but also T3. And generally the most of what we produce, so about 90 to 94% of what the thyroid gland produces endogenously, meaning naturally, is T4 in the form of T4, and then about 6% is T3. However, our T3 is our metabolically active T3. So that is the thyroid hormone that binds to the receptors on cells and exerts its action. So that is what is responsible for basal metabolic rate, body temperature regulation, even carbohydrate, protein, and fat metabolism, all these physiological processes in the body. However, T4 generally will convert to T3 in various tissues like the liver, the gut, and also the kidneys, and then it will become T3. However, what ends up happening is when you have reverse T3 and it's high, what it does is it acts as an antagonist. So it blocks T3's ability to bind to the same cell. So say a muscle cell, we need T3 in the muscle cell to bind to a muscle cell to help with muscle protein synthesis. So when reverse T3 is high, it binds to the same cell and essentially renders regular T3, metabolically free T3, inactive. And so what I saw in Jeremiah's labs were his T4 in range, his free T4 in range, his free T3 in range, and his TSH all in a very good range. Like, honestly, you were in the ideal category. So from a hormonal perspective, if I did not get, and a lot of coaches make this mistake, they don't get reverse T3, I would have had no indice for your stress, because from what your body's perceiving from a thyroid hormone, you're in a state of energy availability, meaning you have enough calories. And generally reverse T3 is high because of multiple reasons. It can be high to that signals, it can be elevated due to a lack of energy availability. So if you're in a deficit, you're in a dieting phase, you're very low in body fat, generally reverse T3 will be high. However, it also indicates high cortisol levels. Unfortunately, there wasn't cortisol, serum cortisol taken in your labs. However, the fact that you're at a good state of energy availability, your testosterone has rebounded and actually been higher, both in terms of total testosterone and free testosterone, than it was on last lab work, and then obviously than it was when you were in a deficit. All your other hormonal markers and everything else within your blood work was indicating you're in a great physiological position. So we got the green light on everything except reverse T3. However, if I had a client that had all these other down regulations, including reverse T3, and I knew that they didn't have the lifestyle construct in place, I would pull back and probably put them into a maintenance phase or a primer phase, and I would really work on restoring their physiology. However, when we had this conversation, and Jeremiah can, expand on this isn't just like a one paragraph text that I sent you. This is,
right.
We're
still having this conversation.
It's back and forth. And I'm looking at your lifestyle. I'm looking at your stress perception. And here's the other thing. I can relate to you on many aspects, not only from a physique enhancement perspective, like trying to push my physique, but also trying to build a business and running multiple entities at the same time. So I can understand the ability to kind of, our perceived stress is low. So just like you said, you don't feel stress, but you have a lot of stressors in the system. And I'm able to see that from an objective perspective because I'm not you. So it's almost like you getting out of your body and looking at yourself, you would realize, hey, I have a lot of responsibilities. I'm building a team. I have a ton of, things on my plate, but I've gotten so used to it. So it's almost like a tolerance, just like with caffeine or anything that we build a tolerance and an endurance towards. We're able to handle more and more. It's the same principles, progressive overload. The more you train, generally, more you can exert yourself, and you'll be able to have a crushing session and recover quicker. And also you're able to lift heavier loads over time. So we've built these skills, and you've built great work capacity, both in the gym, but also in your life, and especially in your business. So it's hard to say, oh, I'm stressed, because we're always looking at things from a retrospective perspective. So, years ago when I was less structured, I was less organized, I was much more stressed. However, I'm guaranteeing that reverse T3 was through the roof then as well. So we have to realize that this is not just a state where we look at something, in one lab report and say, all right, this is an issue just now. It's probably been an issue for a while. So we are going to address them, but also there's another aspect to this. And I want everyone in the audience to realize this. You are not your labs. Your labs are it's an indication of one time in place in life. And so seeing as everything else, we have a green light. So I have a check, when I went through your lab work, everything was a check. Everything looked good. Very little things. And I actually explained as to why. So this is a big difference between how your general practitioner would interpret labs and then how someone that's good with functional nutrition would look at labs, because there's difference between the reference ranges that are based off a sick population and then the optimal ranges that we would look to for someone that's athletic, active, healthy, metabolically fit. And so we had that, that conversation. However, I also know on the back end, we are going to work. And when I tell you, hey, listen, you have to do this, we're going to have to incorporate meditation. We're going to, first and foremost, the first thing I looked at were lifestyle interventions. What are we going to do to help your perception of stress, your ability to recognize stress, as well as your ability to mitigate stress? We're going to focus on those. And obviously I have a vast, experience within supplementation, but that's not my first go. And like I told you, listen, I can employ all these, quote unquote protocols, which I hate that word. However, it would be a program in which I could utilize nutritional supplementation and nutraceuticals to lower your reverse T3. So on lab work, I could get your labs next week and artificially lower it. But that would be a transient decrease. So what that means is, for the moment, because they're suppressed from certain supplementation that we would be utilizing, they'll be lower and they'll look good on lab work. However, I'm trying to make this a lifestyle for you and make this long-term, that you're able to mitigate and find ways to restore the things that we're seeing that are off. And there's only one indication that's off. So this is where I don't feel the need to pull back on your training. However, say we go long-term, we get your next set of labs, it's still elevated, or your biofeedback from a week-to-week basis shows that there's signs and indications of high elevated stress. That's where we'll have to pull back in the moment. But that within my programming, it's never set and forget, and it's always reactive. So it's going to be based off what you're going through at that moment, where your business is at, where's your relationship at. And even into this week's context, when I made an update to your program, there's updates from lifestyle perspective, like the meditation that we've implemented on a daily basis, but also even like how I structured your free meal. I gave you a flexible high day, which is essentially you're matching, you're meeting macros with an increased calorie budget of 750 calories over your high day. And so that was so that you could have more connection with Katie, so that you could have, a time out with her and do something that she likes, which is in turn going to make you happy. So it's an ability to just turn your brain off, know that you have a huge budget to play with and have a good time. And I know you're not really one for huge free meals and stuff. So never would I tell a client that's good with having, whole foods, nutrient dense diet to just go out and, overindulge. That's not I'm a nutrition coach. I'm a health coach. However, I also know that you like to stay within a plan. So giving you some structure, also building in a lot of flexibility, is going to allow you to de-stress during that moment, have a great time, and then also alleviate some of that stress. Even if you don't realize it, I'm sure over time it's going to pay off a lot of dividends.
Absolutely. That's a great breakdown. It's again, such an interesting thing. I think so much of it too, I appreciate like the lifestyle side of it that we talked about. At the same time, it's also frustrating because it's like, God damn it, I don't want to so much of it feels like the things first, as I said, like my perception is I'm way less stressed than I've ever been. But then it's like, man, I don't want to feel like I'm pulling back or doing less. I know but that's probably for so many people, that's I know so many clients listening to this can relate, because it's very much from the coach role, I have this exact same conversation with so many people where it's yeah, and that's exactly what you need. But it's no, really, I'm good.
Yeah, but different. You know what? That's why coaches have coaches. So that's where I'm here to be. Obviously we have a personal friendship, but even from I told you, from a mentorship and from, being here as a coach and a guide, I'm here to be objective with you. I'm here to have these hard conversations and for us to dig in deeper. And that's why, our email chain is huge, but that's because that's what's necessary. And I'm here to guide you through the process, but also we're bouncing ideas off of each other. I didn't tell you, hey, listen, you're going to go meditate. It was, what interventions have you found? I'm going to give you some examples that I've utilized with clients, as I did. I'm going to give you some examples of what I do personally to alleviate stress, what I've seen improve my blood work, because I've had, highly elevated reverse T3, even in a building phase. So energy availability has been in check. All my hormone profiles look good, but my and I shared this with you, but my cortisol was highly elevated, and so was my reverse T3. So now I had, the coal mine and the canary, essentially. And so I've worked through this experience with both myself and with others, but it's always good to have someone who's on your side. It's not that I want you to do less, it's that you may need to do less. And I'm here to be that objective person in your corner to tell you when you need to push and when you need to pull back. And often, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I've worked with many high-level individuals like Jeremiah, or like professional athletes, like IFBB pros. And as much as I would like to say oh, I bury these guys, no, that's not the case. Oftentimes I'm pulling them back from doing things that have hurt them in the past and that would hurt them in the future more than I'm pushing them.
I think that's cool. And Jeremiah, on the meditation talk, that's something that you've never done before. I've been doing that for years now, and I love it. I think it's been super beneficial. I'm just curious to kind of hear your thoughts on it, and do you use anything for it, or you just kind of wing it, or what does that look like for you?
I've done it a lot in the past. I used to find it extremely helpful, actually, 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
I used to do it daily multiple times. I mean, it really helps me with being present. I basically see it as like practice for being present in the rest of your day, which I think is a lot where a lot of like stress and anxiety comes from. But it's just like painful now to just sit there and do it. I've used like Sam Harris's app, I think was great, but and then I like Headspace.
Headspace
Is the other one that I've used a lot. But yeah, those are typically what I've done.
Yeah, I use Headspace, and I'm with you. I feel like it's definitely helpful to just kind of like stay present whenever. I mean, it's still tough to do anyways, even if you do practice meditation, but it definitely can help. I found like doing it first thing in the morning helps because it kind of sets the tone for the day. So I always try to make sure I do that first thing in the morning, because if I don't do it, you guys know how it is. Like if you don't do something first thing, it's like it makes it tough to do it, especially if it's not something that you want to do naturally. Like for me, like working out, like I love doing it. I don't have to do that first thing in the morning. I know some people need to do that in order to fit it in, but yeah. Cool. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add to that, or?
We're pretty deep now.
Yeah.
Did you want to fill us in on anything going on with you, or do you want to get into some questions?
So as far as training goes,
yeah, how is that go? I wanted to ask about that because you're working with Brian now. The other thing we've tried to mention is Jeff and I are now mortal fucking enemies.
Yeah,
because he's. I'm just kidding. No,
this is actually the first time we've talked. So, no, I'm just kidding too.
No,
wait. What? Am I getting a surprise here? Because I don't know what's going on.
No.
So Jeff was working with me as a client for a very long time, and then you've been recently working with Brian Borstein, who's a good friend of I think everyone here's. Just to kind of continue to education, and I'm interested to hear how that's been going.
Yeah. So yeah, I worked with Jared for, man, I mean, it was over 2 years. It was a long time. And I was towards the end, I was definitely reflecting on it. I made so much progress, man, during that period of time. And so
that was cool to see. Like your pictures from your first show versus like the most recent photo shoot we did.
And the lesson in here too is that I thought I knew everything going into it, but I still learned a ton of stuff in the process. Right. And it's like, I took a ton from it, and like, just very grateful for that experience. But yeah, I switched over to Brian just to get, just expand my knowledge a little bit in terms of the training side. I felt like that probably was where I spent a lot of my last couple of years really focused on like nutrition side of things and like metabolism, things like that. And I was like, I need to get back into training a little bit more too. So I went to Brian for a little bit, and yeah, I mean, it's been going well. He has a very interesting approach to training. His split is not your prototypical. Like I've had a couple of questions like, "What's your training split?" And it's just like literally this random like day by day thing. It literally looks like you're just kind of just throwing stuff at a dartboard, but darts at a dartboard. But he obviously has a reason behind it, right, in terms of fatigue management and things like that. But for me, the biggest takeaways. Definitely we've incorporated like more like cable type work, which I've really enjoyed. I've taken a ton away from that. But for me personally, it's really helped me be like, hey, I need to get more form videos from clients, because I'm somebody that's like, dude, I know I feel like I'm a stickler for technique, but it's like, it's easy to let it slip for you if you're not like taking those videos regularly. And so like kind of seeing that's been super helpful. And really just working in more like the length and range for certain movements. Really just slowing down my eccentrics, and he's also incorporated more like mile reps and like rest pause and then like length and partials, which has been really cool to kind of mess around with, and just been a nice, just a little bit different than what I was doing for a while there with like more like RP style kind of training, but it's been good. I've enjoyed it so far. At first I was a little hesitant. I was like, oh man, I'm already missing like the RP, like basically how I've trained the last little while, but yeah. I've liked it so far. I'm personally like just in a building phase and just trying to just slowly gain. I'm going to push my weight to like 170, and I'm getting close to there. And then I'm going to take a mini cut and then go back into a build for a little bit. So that's just where I'm at. I think the biggest thing has been the form stuff and like really dialing that in.
Now, Jeff, just out of curiosity, is he just handling just training? Because I know Brian generally just does training. He doesn't do nutrition for people. So I'm wondering if he's incorporating both for you.
No, I told him I wanted to do that on my own, and just mess with that and just have him do the training side of things. So like in our check-ins, I'll just kind of tell him like, here's where my weight's trended. Here's kind of my game plan and where my calories are at on average. And so, yeah, he's just doing the training side of things, and I'm just communicating to him, what's going on there with that. So
I think, just a comment, not to obviously Jeremiah is a great friend and client of mine. Brian is a good friend of mine as well. So not to take any sides, but I really do encourage people to try different philosophies as well as different practitioners. There have been many times that I've consulted with someone, gotten a program from them, had them just handle even one aspect of my programming. Sometimes it's been someone that I have a great amount of respect for, but I don't think, and this is not a reflection on either of them. So this is completely, opposite or, separated from Brian and Jeremiah, who I have the utmost respect for. But there have been coaches that I've respected their knowledge, but I don't respect the way that they hold themselves. So I wouldn't want to be a client of them, to be completely frank and honest with you guys. I just don't align with them ethically. I don't align with them from like a personality perspective. So I don't want this I don't see them as being someone that I'm going to engage with on a weekly basis or really give them full reins to everything, but I really do like their approach to things. So I've had them program training for me, and I've just went back and forth or learning some of their philosophy, and it's been really eye-opening. So I always encourage people, it's not be coach switching and coach hopping. I really do think like you need to have people in your corner. I have a certain group of people within my corner I've had for 3 years, and I pay them monthly it's on an auto payment. And it's, even if I don't consult with them that month, it's always there if I need questions for myself, or even if I have questions about another client that I'm working with. However, I do think that there's utility in learning from other people's philosophies and going to different ends of the spectrum. So for instance, I spent a long time mentoring under Alan Kress. And during a lot of the time that I worked with Alan, he was going from different practitioners. So at one time, this is someone you might not be familiar with, but this is like 2014. There was a very prominent contest prep coach called Matt Porter. And so he had a supplement brand, but he was huge within the contest prep space. He placed second at nationals multiple times. So a very accredited and successful bodybuilder. Anyone from the boards era will know Matt Porter. Unfortunately, rest in peace as he passed away. But Alan was very close with him. So I learned some of his philosophy from him. And then he started working with Eugene Teo. And I ended up consulting Eugene when he was in Australia and getting a program from him to learn from him. This is early on, like 2015, 2016. Eugene was, just really making on the scene. And then he started, he became very close with Kasim from N1. This is before I ever knew what N1 was. I actually don't know if Kasim had the brand name N1 at the time. So I've shared with Jeremiah, I learned some of like their they were going through testing phases of the metabolic phases, of the neurological phases. They used to call them different, obviously it was a strength phase. And then it started, changing like some of the terminology that they use. So now it was mechanical tension phase or whatever it may be. However, I learned a lot of those initial, phases from Alan himself, and I had him run me through them. And some things I saw great utility in, and some I didn't. And so I was able to pick and choose and really see, because I was not only utilizing them with myself, but I was really consulting him on a weekly basis on calls. And so it wasn't just him coaching me, but he was also mentoring me. So then I was able to utilize them with my clientele, collect data on how I was responding, as well as how a large subset of completely different individuals from me. So we're ranging from, general population clients to physique competitors, how they were responding. And then I was able to take and I kind of weave and really, if you look at my programming style, you really can't like take it down to one person or one philosophy, because I have so many different things and it's really based on the clientele. So there are things that I'll utilize with Jeremiah that I wouldn't use with another client. There's things like, for specifically Anthony Scalza, like one of my FBB pros who I've had the longest extent working with. So I've worked consecutively with him for 3+ years. There are so many things that I've tried within his programming that it's a new evolution. Every 6 months, I'm like, listen, we're going to try this. I'm experimenting with this. I've given it 6 months. Now, are you open to this? So it really is, coaching is an evolutionary process. So just like we change our philosophies, it's good to learn from others.
Yeah. And that's a conversation we had too, where it's like, dude, that's exactly what I've done that's been so helpful. I don't, as you said, like none of us are encouraging coach hopping, but I'm very grateful for every coach that I've worked with, because I've always picked up something new. It's always helped me grow as a coach. And that's like, I was joking about us, of course, being mortal enemies. We're definitely not, but it's like, absolutely, man. Like I enjoyed our time working together, but I fully encourage you to like, that's how you continue to grow, especially as a coach. Like, absolutely. So I'm glad to hear it's going well, dude.
Yeah. And also I didn't mean that you like do RP, like that's not what I meant by that. You and Brian both, and I know Brandon, you're the same way too. And I've picked this up from all you guys, is like, it's more of a conversation about training and things like that, right? Like Jeremiah, you were very like, hey, here's kind of what I think. And then we would have this conversation in terms of like exercise selection and what to do. And I was very, I was definitely probably more like, hey, this is kind of what I want to do there with the training style, right? So that wasn't me being like, hey, you force that style training on me, or that's your style training. Like I know you have, you've learned a ton as well, and like you have different styles as well, and what you think is best for the client as well too.
I'll never forget though, when you first started coaching with me, the condition was only if I can write my own training program. That I was like, this motherfucker, this.
Yep.
Funniest thing ever.
Well, my condition too.
Game so far though, dude.
Yep. Well, and my first condition with Brian too is like, dude, I don't want to train legs a ton. That's my first thing. I don't want to freaking do it. Luckily, it sounds like you're in the same boat now. You don't have to train legs as much either. And yeah. So
but very much like with the conversation with Brandon, all of ours were like, and especially like advanced clients like you, where it's like all of our conversations, every meso was like, all right, dude, here's what I think. Let me know what you think. Is there anything in here that you feel like I'm missing? Like maybe we need to plug in this movement for this movement. And it would be like, let me get your feedback as well. And then let's take the program from there.
Yeah, I think I do want to highlight this because I'm sure that we're going to have clients that listen to this and say, why don't we have these conversations? And it's because they're just not at that level yet. So I think this is really a very specific clientele. So I do want to differentiate this. This is something that when someone's at a very advanced level, there have been individuals, and I'm going to be completely frank with you, that would blow my physique out of the water, that have attained physique success or competitive success that I will never dream to get to. And so with them, some of these individuals, they've trained longer than I have. They're full-time professionals, or someone like Jeremiah that I have an immense amount of respect for. He is extremely successful in his own right as a coach. So really, when it comes down to coaching, that's where it really is a collaborative effort. When it comes to other clientele who are less experienced, they're coming to us due to our expertise. And that's really where, especially for the baseline programming, for the first, say, 3 to 6 months that we work with someone, I'm going to want to use a style that I'm more familiar with and that I've seen better results with more times than not. And I'm going to want to gauge their response. And then I'm taking their biofeedback and making adjustments very specific to that person, because I'm very into reactive programming. So I'm never going to tell a clientele, hey, we're going to run a 4-to-1 paradigm where you're going to accumulate for 4 weeks. We're going to deload 1 week after that. There's never going to be this set and forget programming. But when I have someone that's, say, beginner or intermediate, they really haven't reached like that really precipice of their physique, where it's almost like an asymptote, where they're really not, when I get an advanced individual, first of all, they have so much experience. I just made a physique transformation post today of a client of mine, Craig McDonald, who's out of Australia. Guys, about to be 40 years old, has been training 20 plus years, extremely experienced. We had a really great building phase, but he was previously coached by Jordan Peters. And if you guys know Jordan Peters, very high intensity, low volume individual out of the UK, extremely successful, coaches multiple Olympians on the bodybuilding Olympia level stage. So when we did our consultation about coaching, and we still do this on a bi-weekly basis, a lot of the adjustments I'm making, we're going back and forth. We're bouncing ideas. Hey, what has worked with you? What hasn't? And it's really a collaborative effort. But when I have someone that doesn't, have that experience, I mean, this individual has been coaching as long as I have. So it really is a collaborative effort. But when I have someone come to me who's a client, and I'm sure you guys can attest this at the same time, they're coming to you for the answers. They're coming to you for your expertise and for your programming skills. So instead of, yes, I can take some of your feedback, and I'm always going to give you a list of questions that I want previous to ever completing a program, ranging from your preferences to your availability to really the time constraints within your life, the things that you like within the gym, the things that you want to prioritize. But often really what I'm making from a programming is taking, really was trying to blend a mix between what's optimal and what's practical, but also taking all the knowledge and the experience that I've accumulated and really utilizing that and leveraging that within the programming itself.
Yeah. And I think some people just want, again, and it, like you said, people that are newer to it, it's like they, these conversations are going to be a little bit different, but I think some people do hire a coach just to be like, hey, like write the program for me, tell me what to do. Right. And there's a lot of value in that. And then I had one more thing I wanted to bring up. I knew I should have said that one first. I can't, it will come back to me. I can't think of it right now. I had it on I knew I should have said that one first. You guys ever do that? You just feel like you need to write it down. Otherwise it just completely skips out of your head.
It's all good. Do you guys want to get at least one question?
Yes.
I don't know if we'll have time for more than one. So I
think this is a good time. To switch it, and I'll just stop in the middle of while you're answering this question, Brandon, to say what I was going to say. No, I'm just kidding. Let's go with, so alcohol and muscle growth. Does that affect muscle growth?
Who wants to take it first? All right, I will take it. All right, so indirectly, does alcohol affect muscle growth? Really, when it comes to alcohol, if we look at it from a mechanistic perspective, it is going to downregulate some of the processes involved in muscle growth. But really, we're looking at this from an indirect perspective, because really, when you look at the research on alcohol, it's really done in, I want to say, unrealistic circumstances. So they'll look at muscle protein synthesis effects post workout after taking, they'll look at someone training in the lab, and then they'll have them drink a ton of alcohol. It's like shots through the roof, 10, 11 alcoholic beverages. And then they're looking at their basal rates of muscle protein synthesis, and they do see a downregulation in that. Same thing with testosterone, same thing with other markers of hormones that would indicate body composition decrements. However, really, realistically, most people that are drinking alcohol aren't going to be doing so post-workout. It's not like, hey, I'm going to have a beer as my post-workout carbs. However, that's direct, if we look at direct data on muscle or on alcohol intake and muscle growth. However, if we look at indirectly, is alcohol down-regulating the processes involved in muscle growth and body composition? 100%. 10 out of 10 times. And here's the thing. So really, when we look at alcohol, there used to be like this like what's called the French paradox. Really, what that refers to is there's almost like a J-shaped curve in terms of the dose response effect of where alcohol is healthy and then it becomes unhealthy in terms of mortality. However, just recently, there was a recent study that looked at this, and there really is no healthy dose of alcohol in terms of health parameters. So it's not, going to be adding to anything. And it's not that you guys cannot have alcohol. This isn't like a zero-sum game where it's either you can drink or you can't drink. It's just like it's a spectrum. So really, when it comes to, if we're looking directly at body composition, we have to look at multiple aspects. So first, we have to look at it from an energy content perspective. So every gram of alcohol, 7 calories per gram. So it's energy dense. Then also we have to look at it from a satiety perspective. If you actually look at the research, not only on liquids and satiety, but also on alcohol and satiety, we do not see a satiety response, meaning you do not get fullness from it. And I'm thinking that that's pretty, people could obviously come to that, because oftentimes what it ends up doing is it decreases disinhibition. So what that means is you're more likely to be more susceptible to eat hyperpalatable foods and less likely to stick to, say, a nutritional regimen, or to eat things that are really going to be conducive with your goals when you've consumed alcohol. So now it's affecting multiple aspects. So it's more, not only does it hurt body composition from an energy perspective, because now you're taking in excess energy, probably putting you in a surplus. Also, when we look at it from metabolization perspective, alcohol is going to be preferentially metabolized by the body first before any other macronutrients. So say, for instance, we're looking at someone that is in a building phase. They are in a 250 calorie surplus, and that's coming from a mix of carbohydrates and fats. Now, say they took in an additional 500 calories from alcohol. Your body's going to preferentially try to metabolize and excrete that alcohol first and foremost. So it's going to burn through and oxidize alcohol before those other substrates. So now you're at a 750 calorie surplus, but your carbs and fats are being stored in adipose. It's being stored as fat because you're in a surplus first and foremost. But also your body is trying to essentially, this is the word that they use in the research, honestly, it's seen as a poison. It's ethanol. So it's a poison or a toxin to the body. And so your body's trying to preferentially burn that to get it out of the system. And so first, you're going to be storing more of the substrates or the extra substrates in fat tissue because you're in a surplus, but also because it doesn't have any satiety response. So often when people go out and drink, it's not like, hey, I had 500 calories worth of drinks and different liquors tonight. I'm going to eat 500 calories less to make up for that. You didn't get any hunger or fullness response. You didn't feel full as a result of it. So you're more likely to not only continue eating the same amount that you did, but you're also more likely after that to make less favorable choices with your nutrition, which are going to add to that subsequent surplus that you've had. So oftentimes this will knock someone out of energy balance. And I often see clients that the one thing that they did the first couple of weeks that we worked together was to either substantially decrease or eliminate alcohol. So for right now, there's like sober January or whatever it's called, where people aren't drinking. Dry January. Exactly. Thank you. I've actually, I'm going to be honest with you guys, this is my 10th anniversary on January 1st of not drinking. So I've been sober for a decade. So, in terms of any of those, holidays or those month periods, I never know the names for them, but those that do that, I've seen drastic results in someone's body composition just from the reduction or elimination of alcohol. Then we also have to think about it from a habits and a lifestyle perspective. So we know that alcohol consumption downregulates and depreciates sleep sleep quality. So a lot of people say, hey, listen, I sleep better after I have an alcoholic beverage at night. Yes, it acts as a sedative, but it doesn't actually interrupt REM and deep sleep. So you're getting less quality sleep. Even if you get the same amount, you're getting less quality sleep in terms of your actual sleep cycles. So now you're waking up the next morning, you're not getting as good of sleep. Or maybe you had interrupted sleep because you were out late the night before due to the other activities that, that accompany alcohol. So say you're out at the bar, you're out later than usual. You're now suffering from social jet lag, which is where we set back our sleep times and wake times, getting less sleep quality, less sleep quantity most of the time. That's also going to skew your hunger hormones, leptin and ghrelin. So we're going to see a decrease in leptin, which is our satiety hormone, which also plays a major role in energy expenditure. So you're going to be more or less likely to move around that day. So you're probably going to have lower NEAT. You're going to have higher hunger levels the next day. You're going to be more likely to overeat. And then also from a training performance and recovery perspective, when you're getting less sleep or less quality sleep, we're going to see a down or a suppression in training performance, especially when it was accompanied by alcohol. Because think about anyone that's had a really, extravagant Friday night and has tried to get up Saturday for their morning workout or for their workout in general. They're just unable to put as much effort, and their rating of perceived exertion is much higher as a result. So it's not that alcohol, like say one or a few alcoholic beverages are going to directly impact muscle growth, but it's all the downstream cascades that it has on your habits, your behaviors, and your nutritional choices, how you feel, your perception, your psychology. So there's so many things. And then also when we look at it from like a health perspective, there are, it does have very detrimental effects on brain and neurology, especially. So we're also seeing that, memory, cognition, focus can be downregulated or diminished as a result of alcohol consumption, especially when it's regular. So really when it comes down to it, it's not this black and white thing where you can't have alcohol and grow muscle. I've known plenty of people that have alcohol in very moderate forms. However, when it really does come down to the research and we look at what's the minimum effective dose, there are a couple health overseeing bodies that will say 4 drinks every month or something of that sort. And really what I've seen other practitioners that really work within the health space more than the physique enhancement space really advocate is, instead of spreading them out and getting those deleterious effects, like say 1 drink every week, just do that one condensed period, let that have its residual effects that next day. So say it's 4 drinks per month, have those 4 drinks one day, one day of the month, get the residual effects for that one day after, and then, abstain or reduce it for the rest of the month.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think we need to not look at it from a direct standpoint and more from an indirect standpoint, right? Where you said it's all these downstream effects. The main one that comes to mind is the training aspect, where you get poor sleep and then training sucks and recovery sucks. And it's that, again, indirectly is going to hurt muscle growth, but also from the body composition standpoint too. You mentioned that, you're going to have this increase in your inhibitions are going to lower, and then you're going to, lower energy expenditure. You're going to eat more food. And so I think from a body composition standpoint, you're going to, maybe you'll build muscle, but it's you might have a little bit more body fat than you would want, right? And that's going to hurt your overall look. So, and I think when you have more body fat, it's you don't really necessarily see all the muscle that you do have. So it's indirectly it affects that. You kind of mentioned this too. And you said if you have 500 calories worth of alcohol, it's that's not, you're not going to eat food, or you're not going to have the nutrients that you're going to get from food. Satiety is going to be off. You're not going to get full from that. But from my understanding, you're going to be missing out on those nutrients. But does alcohol also deplete your nutrients as well too? It's going to do that. And so you're also, you're missing out on nutrients, but it could potentially deplete your nutrients as well. And the process, which is going to be a net negative for building muscle as well. So those were kind of the main things there that I wanted to say, from an indirect standpoint. But Brandon, I feel like you're thinking on what I said. So
Yeah, so I don't know if it will actually cause a further excretion of nutrients. I know that it can possibly cause dehydration, which could indirectly cause an excretion of nutrients. However, let's think about it from more of a practical perspective. Say that you do replace, and you are that 1 out of 10 individuals that actually does track your calories when you go out to drink, which is very hard to do, because really when we look at it, if you go out to a bar, the average shot You don't know if that's 1 or 2 ounces. It's very hard to track alcohol. Sometimes people are putting chasers in. That's where really let's stick with like light liquors. Let's stick with vodka and things that are lower calorie, or things that you could track. Like, I know a lot of people like White Claw or whatever it may be, low calorie or low carbohydrate beers, things like that. So you can more accurately track those things first and foremost. However, there's a tracking and estimation error in them in and of themselves. But if you are someone that has a calorie budget, so say that your maintenance calories are 2,500 calories per day, and you fit 500 calories into that from alcohol. All right, you're in energy balance. You're not going to gain weight. However, you are displacing 500 calories of nutrient dense food sources that you could be getting. So that is where we can then see down regulations in other hormones, such as thyroid, if you're not getting selenium, iodine, and zinc, in testosterone, if you're not getting zinc. There's different downstream cascades. And now one day, couple days a month, not going to have those effects, or really going to have noticeable effects on all those hormonal markers and things of that sort. But also, if you're doing it in a frequent basis, it's almost like the devil's in the dose with all things in life. Honestly, when we look at training volume, when we look at stress, when we look at sleep quality, everything's in the dose in and of itself. So if you're frequently drinking, not only your habits are going to be impacted, but also you're displacing nutrient dense calories. You're probably drinking more calories as well as eating more calories than really you're aiming to, just due to the fact that you're not getting your satiety response from them. But also we see that with alcohol, and it's going to depend on the type. So, we would have to really dive into the literature on this. However, it does cause a lot of gastrointestinal issues like gut dysbiosis. So I honestly see this more with females than I do with males, to be honest with you. And it could be the fact that they're more susceptible to ethanol in smaller doses. So even just the same frequency as a male, they're just impacted by it more because of their lowered body weight and lowered body mass. So they're more heavily impacted from it. But I do see that a lot of women that have come to me with conditions which most would label as like estrogen dominance, which is really just the physiological state in which estrogen is high relative to progesterone. A lot of them have issues with phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification, but that's also impacted by the fact that they're over consuming alcohol. So they're having gastrointestinal issue effects, whether it be SIBO, whether it be intestinal permeability, which a lot of people will label as like leaky gut, but like in the literature, it's going to be notated as intestinal permeability. You're going to see more GI issues as a result, as well as the fact that they're seeing negative effects on their liver markers like their AST and their ALT, and they're less likely to be able to excrete and detoxify the excess estrogen in their system. So now it's having negative cascades and downstream effects on multiple things. And remember, when it comes to GI health, this is something that's become extremely popular within the last couple of years, but we're not what we eat. We're what we eat, absorb, and assimilate. So if you cannot, say, when it comes to protein, if you cannot break down and you don't have the enzymes necessary to break down protein to actually, get those amino acids into the blood and stimulate muscle protein synthesis, there's going to have all these downstream effects. So I think really when it comes to literature on this, there's very little on body composition in and of itself. They also don't do long-term trials on something like alcohol. They're always acute, meaning one incident, because really when we think about it from like an ethical perspective, what IRB would approve to have like a binge drinking trial where we put people in a condition where they have to drink every single day for a month to see the body composition effects. We're never going to get approval for that. However, just think about it from your habits, your behaviors, and also how you feel. I've never had a client that's come to me that has drank a ton of alcohol the night before and then told me, hey, coach, I drank all this alcohol, I overate, and I feel great the next morning. I had a great training session. I was sweating out all this alcohol and I felt like it was a really productive day. They always have the opposite. So really just from a lifestyle perspective, let's think about this from the fact that if you want to improve your body composition, you want to make this a part of your lifestyle, you want to be able to have a lean muscular physique, you're going to need to pair and align your behaviors and your habits with one that's conducive for not only your physique and the development and progression of that, but also your lifestyle as a whole, both physical, mental progression, development, and then just feeling good day to day, because it's not enough to just look good. There's plenty of people that I'm sure that have done it, and if it fits your macros and fit in a shot per night just to do it as an experiment and have looked great, but I guarantee that their internal physiology and their blood work has not looked good.
Yeah. No, good point. Yeah, no, I'm glad you kind of talk about that and how, again, probably it's more indirect than anything. So, Brandon, I know you said you had to hop off. Did you still need to go? You have to go.
I do have to
go,
yes.
I want to finish up with Jeremiah, just get his thoughts on this. But we can continue it if you don't mind, just for a few more minutes. I know, Jerry, you probably have to get off soon too.
Yeah, I got a couple minutes, but Brandon, you're welcome to dip if you need to.
I guess. I will see you later. Always a pleasure.
Yep. Good talking to you
later, dude.
Later.
So,
Yeah.
Jared, what I was going to say is, did you just kind of have any practical applications there with that, or anything else you wanted to kind of add
I
to
mean, I
that?
agree. I don't have any expansion on the knowledge behind all that, but I think even if we look at like there's a very clear correlation, just anecdotally, if you look at your client base, you look at okay, these people typically drink a good bit less than average. These people drink like more on average than the rest of my clients. There's a very clear correlation you'll see between the people that struggle the most to get the physique results they want and the people that drink the most. And I think we're in a similar boat here where I love alcohol and it bums me out that I can't drink as much because I would love to just like have a glass or multiple glasses of wine every night,
Yeah.
but very much like I think, and I'm sure you can probably agree with what you see with clients where, and I think it's more indirect than direct. I don't think it's like, even if we're looking at it like 1 to 2 glasses of wine per week, a couple drinks per week, where it's like, hey, I'm just at home, I'm having a glass of wine, or even maybe I go out to a bar and I have like 1 to 2 glasses every now and then, like that doesn't have a massive detriment in with what I see in anecdote on clients, but or on someone's progress. But the individual who is like, I have like 2 to 3 drinking occasions typically per week, or I drink in excess of a couple drinks per night. Those individuals are always the ones that struggle the most to see the body composition changes. And again, a lot of it is indirect, but like think about that client you have who it's like, okay, Monday through Friday, you're dialed in, and then they go out every Friday night and they always have more than like 3 drinks. That almost always leads to, okay, well, hey coach, I like ended up like I had a pizza that night, and then the next day I was hungover and we had to have hungover food. And it can easily turn into every single week this cycle repeats itself, right? And it's sometimes it comes down to like, hey, if you're not willing to pull back, like we can only get so aggressive during the week. This might like we're gonna have a conversation around like no, and again, like I wish things weren't this way because truly like I love alcohol. I love like all the different wines and things of that nature. But unfortunately, it's just the reality a lot of times. Any thoughts on all that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you mentioned the person is like the pizza thing. Like sometimes I'm sure people even forget they do it too, right? They drink so much
Oh
that
yeah.
they forget to do it. But then also to talk about what you just said there, where like you have that person that like, maybe you decrease during the week. If you're somebody that is regularly trying to fat loss diet and then you do this also, it's like that's a recipe for like just overconsumption on the weekends, right? If you are like
Oh
dieting during the
yeah.
week, trying to fat loss diet, and then you do that, it's like that's a recipe for like I said, overconsumption there. But I'm
The
with you.
one thing, sorry, like the one thing that's just an interesting conversation. I'll say that for like most everyone, the one thing like that individual who like diets does well all week and then struggles on the weekend has in common is like there's typically again like 3+ drinks. And again, like I feel like I sound like a such a bummer right now, but I don't know. I feel like it is a very strong trend.
It is. It is. I mean, it's the truth, right? I mean, that's what we got to tell people. But I'm with you too. I definitely enjoy alcohol. I mean, I used to enjoy it way more when I was back in college. But like for me now, it's not even like yes, I wouldn't tell you the full truth in that like it's not just body composition. Like that is obviously super important to me, like muscle growth, losing body fat, and having a good body composition. But it is more so just the way it makes me feel when I have more than a couple glasses the next day, right? Like I hate that feeling, and I hate just feeling like crap the next day. And that's honestly for me the bigger deterrent in terms of me having more alcohol than I do. Because I'm like you, if there was no repercussions from a body composition standpoint or waking up not feeling great the next day, I probably would have a lot more alcohol than I do. I'm with you, probably a couple glasses of wine per week. Some weekends maybe a little bit more than that, but I would say probably on average about 1 to 2 glasses of wine per weekend. So
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And again, I don't, none of this is to say like there's no room to work it in. I know a lot of both of our clients drink alcohol, but I also think again, like if you're, I don't want to say like in excess, but if it's something that's consistently causing you to deviate from the plan, it can have a large impact on your body composition. So again, I think it's not saying like, I'm definitely not saying it's like the wrong thing to do, but just weighing out again, like, hey, is this, especially in a fat loss phase, if you're consuming like a good bit, and again, like that's one of the most common stumbling blocks where again, like people will go into every weekend with the best intentions, but it's like, hey, once you get 4 or 5 drinks in me, all of my inhibition goes out of the window. That's a very common stumbling block. So if that's you, it's again, I think just reevaluating like what are my priorities, and there's no right or wrong. Like I don't blame you at all if it's like I would rather just have more drinks, and I'm okay with not getting a little bit leaner. But I think that's just an important thing to think through. But I don't really have anything else to add there.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's having that conversation with the client, and you, I think you made a post on this recently too, where you said like, hey, you have the choice to get as lean as you want, right? And I think that's
Right.
like that's part of that conversation. And two, maybe it's better strategies around drinking too. I'm sure that's stuff you work on with clients too. It's better strategies with it. So one last thing before we end this, I did think of what I wanted to say earlier when we were talking about having different coaches, mentors, things like that, and different philosophies. And it was, these are all like different tools in the toolbox that you can use with your training and like programming for clients and stuff like that. So I just wanted to say that at the end, because I did remember it like literally 2 seconds after I said I forgot. So anything else you want to add, or anything to the show, or anything from today?
That's a great thought. I think that's all I had. Good catching up with you guys. We made it like 75 minutes of not answering a single question. I think it's
I
a new
know
PR for us,
that
but
is.
I think there's a lot of application. I think there's a lot helpful there still that people can take away. So always
Yeah.
great to catch up.
Well, like we said before, that I think a lot of people enjoy that almost more than the questions. So yeah, we'll obviously do it again soon, man, and we'll chat with you soon.
Cool. Catch you guys later.